And so when I came to music in my 20s, it was not from a place of wanting some great career as a musician, although there was times when my ego would take over and motivate me from that standpoint. And God used that too. But really, it was about healing myself and coming into alignment with who I was. Because I woke up in my 20s and realized I had no idea who I was. I had spent so much of my life in reaction to the world around me and in many codependent behaviors, because I'm an empath and feel very sensitively and care deeply for the people around me, and had gotten so lost in all of that, so lost in my own fear, my own depression, that I really didn't know when God started speaking to me and I really began to awaken to the joy that was available. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know which direction to go. And that's what I want to talk about today, that in many cases, the education system has failed students. I was an A student. I did great in school all the way through college, graduated cum laude 3.5 for Texas A&M, and still had no clue. So this is one of the quotes by Anthony C. Sutton that I like. It's, "The Dewey educational system does not accept the role of developing a child's talents, contrarily only to prepare the child to function as a unit in an organic whole. In blunt terms, a cog in the wheel of an organic society." So that doesn't sound too bad when you first, hear that. Um, but the problem with it comes from the fact that um, society is not really a healthy, functioning society. There's many ways that fitting into this system is not necessarily good for people. Or, I think all of that is being exposed in what some people would call the apocalypse or a great revealing. If you have eyes to see now, you can see it very clearly. But for many of us, we could see these things a long time ago and we didn't necessarily want to be part of that system, but we didn't also know where else to go. And so for me, that's where music was. It was my refuge. It was a place for me to spend hours and days and years that felt healthy, that felt like it was helping me to align slowly back to who I was, to heal traumas, to face the programming and the self-sabotaging that was clearly in me, and in many ways to unwind, right? Unwind from that. And it provided a sort of frequency protection from the world, because I've talked on previous episodes how many things in this world operate, if not everything, from a level of frequency. So when you're depressed and sad, you're going to be, more open and vulnerable to being attacked from lower vibrational things, right? To be sucked into relationships that are lower vibrational, to get pulled into abuse, to be repeating patterns, to get stuck in these lower vortexes. And they're very hard to get out of when you're in them. Music is one of those things that can help you, because as you raise your vibration, you start to become impervious to that. And you start to then attract things that help you to stay at a higher vibration, that protect you from those. You're not a match anymore for those things, right? So that's a lot about what music was for me. And it took a very long time. It wasn't an overnight thing. But the more that I did music, the more I wanted to be involved in music. Now, I will back up and say that even before that, I was involved in textbook publishing. All in my 20s, I was involved in textbook publishing. And I also was involved with higher education, thinking I would go back for a master's in art history. And because of those two experiences, I really thought a lot about education just right from the start. I think I have always loved learning. And it was very clear that I could be one of those people who's a student for life. Like, I really didn't have, very much common sense, to be honest. I didn't have a lot of business sense. I wasn't even really interested in making money. That's how out of the current society and system I was. I just wasn't motivated by materialistic type of things at all. But knowledge did motivate me, and I loved learning. So it was very disillusioning when I saw behind the curtain of how textbooks were made. And I saw that in many cases, I had set this up as some sort of authority when it didn't warrant that. It was being decided by political means, by very haphazard means. There was, back when I was doing it, it was almost more of the right that was controlling it, but it was like the editors were always anticipating what the right was going to say. And they were always trying to make choices so that the right wouldn't come in and say, hey, why are you putting this in there? Why are you doing that? We're going to sue you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. I think now it might have swung the other way. And I think it might be being dictated more by the left in this country. But either way, the point is politics are affecting what's being put. And I think this is obvious to everybody now, but I sort of saw this for myself back in the late 90s, early aughts. And it was like a realization that I had set this up as an authority as a young girl. And I compared everything to this and realized that it wasn't worth that. It wasn't the right thing to do. Later, I would also come to realize that many of the references in my head were giving me a false sense of reality. Textbooks were only one of them, another being TV and movies, which I just put so much time and attention into, gave it so much credibility that this was the way of the world, when that's not necessarily the case at all. And the other thing I want to say about textbooks that personally did to me is that I struggled a lot with acne when I was in my teens, and I would look in these textbooks and be like, nobody has acne in these textbooks, you know? So something's really wrong with me. And that's just an example of how off children can be and why they need the guidance of parents to help them to see that they're not necessarily coming to correct conclusions about the world. So when I got into textbooks and I was part of the photo research team and we were selecting people without acne only, and then nowadays it gets into photoshopping and all that stuff, all that was a wake-up call. And it might seem trite at this point, but in my 20s when all that happened, it made me realize that I did want to be a part of education, but I didn't want to be a part of that. And so that's where, as I became more and more enveloped in music and loved it more and more as I was practicing nights, weekends by myself after my photo research job, I recognized I wanted to share it. For me, it was always a sense of all of us should be doing this. I just had that. And maybe it's a naive view, but that's that feeling I have inside of myself, that each of us is meant to have an instrument just as part of who we are. If we were fully functioning with our entire brains the way that Einstein, I can't remember what the percentages says, like we use like 8% of our brains. Like if we all use 100% of our brain, playing music would be just the same as walking. We would all have an instrument. We'd all play it. It'd all be part of our experience. And how fun would that be, right? Like you just go over to your friend's house and, say, hey, let's, play a few songs, or let's do this. And it's just part of our lives in a very normal way. I always had visions of that, and I always wanted to be part of that. So that's where I came to music education from. And I learned through that there were many alternative teaching models that are thinking in this direction. Reggio Emilia is one of those. And it's sort of along the lines of this. This is a quote that I saw just the other day online. It's, imagine if schools actually help kids identify their strengths by exploring their talents from a young age and growing their skills over the 12 years, instead of letting them follow the same routine and leaving them confused in life after graduation. So when I read that, I was like, yeah, I'm not the only one who goes through this system thinking that you're checking all the boxes and doing everything right. And then, especially when you're making straight A's, and then you get into real life and you don't have a clue what's going on, right? That's how I was. And I hope not everybody feels as confused or has as difficult a time as I have had, trying to find my career and feel a sense of purpose. But I think that's something that we're all are entitled to. There's many things that we think we're entitled to that I wouldn't agree. Like having the latest trendy shoe, or, doing a lot of the things that Americans in general, I'll speak only about Americans, think that they're entitled to. Like even running water, I guess we think we're so entitled to. But something I do think we're entitled to is a sense of purpose in our life, feeling that we are contributing something meaningful to our community, and that we are a valuable member of our community. And this is exactly what people don't feel, right? Even, and it's confusing because nobody can help them with it. The school systems aren't helping. Many parents are not able to help their children with this, and it's not by any fault of the parent. In many cases, they are just struggling to make sure the material needs of the child are met and that that child is not starving to death. And when you hear about other countries and having children that literally the parents end up having to sell the children into sex slavery to make sure the family doesn't starve, then you recognize, listen, parents are doing a lot by making sure these children never have to worry about those things. But there's a whole nother side to this that needs to be explored and understood and expanded. And when I posted this David Avocado quote, imagine if schools actually help kids identify their strengths, I had a friend respond to me in private just saying, that's what it sounds like parenting. And he was that kind of parent. He is that kind of parent. He very much is focused and always has been on knowing how to help the child explore, but with help and guidance and structure. And this is that balance that I was talking about last week. And I definitely want to back up for a minute and say that this is not a lecture to tell parents how they should be doing things and judging, because I don't know. If I was a parent, I really don't know how difficult it would be to maintain a balance like this 24/7, especially when I'm, primarily caring for that child's health and needs, right? Basic human needs. I don't know that. And I want to be honest with that up front. But what I do